Welcome in, everyone, to the Lucky Shots podcast. I am Ricky Larson. We're going to start doing the show a little differently. So, today, Wednesday, we are going to do an in-depth look at every single game this coming week, kind of what both teams look like, and how the game is going to go. Thursdays will be a full fantasy show, just covering fantasy football on that day. And then Fridays, we will be doing sports betting with Dylan. So, without further ado, let's hop right into every single game coming up this week. We'll start with outlining the byes. So, Atlanta, New Orleans, New York Jets, and the 49ers, they all are on bye. So none of those teams will be playing, and we're finally into those bye weeks. So things will start to get interesting with teams starting to, have their week off. We start out on Thursday night between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Philadelphia Eagles. The Buccaneers are 4-1 coming into this game. The Eagles are 2-3. The Bucs won last week, 45-17 against the Dolphins. Just a huge game for them. They played absolutely terrific. Tom Brady had a first in his career, which I don't know how you have firsts in your career when you're 45, but 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. The first time in his career he has thrown for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns in the same game. Looked terrific. The defense had 3 sacks, 2 turnovers, allowed less than 300 yards passing, and less than 50 yards rushing. So they looked, on defense, they were outstanding. And then they had 3 receivers with 6 receptions or more, and 2 receivers with 100 yards receiving. So they're looking good. They're looking exactly like you would expect the Buccaneers to look. And on the other side, you had the Eagles, who beat the Panthers 21-18. The offense, still not there. Still not impressive. Jalen Hurts had less than 200 passing yards and 2 interceptions. He did have 2 rushing touchdowns, however, so that, made up for things. But their defense forced 3 interceptions and allowed less than 300 total yards. So it's a defense that I've been wondering about all year. Are they legit? Are they not legit? And Carolina is an offense that's looked really good so far this season. So the fact that they held them to under 300 yards, got 3 picks, and won the game by a field goal, they looked really, really impressive to me, to be honest. But this is a game that I don't know about the Eagles. Their defense, still yet to see, and they're going to go in against a Bucs offense that is just firing on all cylinders, and a Bucs defense that is insane, with the Eagles offense being terrible, more or less. Like, they've just been not very good at all, but still putting up enough to win games. The popularity on this, the Buccaneers, 97% of people are picking them. So they're obviously the favorites. And, I think it's going to be a good game for the Buccaneers. I think they'll do all right. I think the Eagles are going to struggle. Moving on to the Dolphins versus the Jaguars. This one's going to be interesting. Dolphins are 1-4. Jaguars are 0-5. Dolphins lost last week to the aforementioned Buccaneers, 45-17. But the big kind of story for the Dolphins right now is Jacoby Brissett. 858 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Last week had 275, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. He's playing really well. The only problem is, since he's been the starter, they haven't won a game. No wins under Jacoby Brissett. But the offense is looking all right. Myles Gaskin even, you'll see in tomorrow's show, he was one of the top running backs this past week. Played really well. Brissett is honestly playing really well, putting them into games. There is a big talent gap between the Buccaneers and the Dolphins, so that's why that score is so lopsided. But Especially coming in against a weak Jaguars defense or Jaguars team. I think that the Dolphins have a good shot in this game. And Brissett, I think he could have a really good game as well. Speaking of the Jaguars, they lost to the Titans 37-19. They're just bad, 0-5. You had controversy with Urban Meyer last week. This offense just isn't looking great. But if you look at their last 4 losses, they only lost to the Bengals by 3, which is impressive because the Bengals are looking really good this year. Lost by 12 to the Cardinals, which, honestly, the fact that they didn't lose by more to the Cardinals, who are the only undefeated team left, looking really good. That's kind of not that bad of a loss. They lost by 10 to the Broncos. Broncos aren't looking all that great, unfortunately. And then, week 1, that big shocking loss to the Texans by 16. They're just not looking good. They got to get it figured out. One thing they got to figure out is Trevor Lawrence. He's had 0 games with a positive touchdown to interception ratio. He's currently sitting at 6 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. So, first of all, he has to start taking care of the ball. If he continually gives it away more than he's scoring, obviously the team's going to not be successful. But they have started working in James Robinson, the running back. He's got 315 yards, 4 touchdowns in the last 3 weeks. So he's doing very, very well. The Jaguars need to start learning that he's one of the main points of their offense. He's very talented, and you got to get the ball in his hands. The popularity on this game is Miami. 68% of people are picking them. It's kind of a toss-up game. You have a team that's 1-4, a team that's 0-5. Who do you pick? I mean, it's kind of a toss-up. Honestly, I think Brissett's doing fantastic. I think he's got a good chance to get his first win with the Dolphins. So we'll have to see how that goes. But it's also a game that the Jaguars, the Dolphins aren't looking great, so the Jaguars have a chance. It'll be an interesting game to see the outcome. I don't know how interesting it will be to watch. But that's how you kick off your Sunday morning, is with the Dolphins and the Jags. Moving on to the Vikings versus the Panthers. The Vikings have to be one of the most impressive 2-3 teams I've been watching. They're sitting where they won last week, 19-17 against the Lions, averaging 22 points a game, 1,300 passing yards, and 560 rushing yards. Have the 14th total offense, which, that's middle of the pack, which is, what you would expect to see, I guess, from a team that's 2-3. But all 3 of their losses have come by one score. So, and especially with their opponents' combined record being 12-3, that's really good. They're right there. They have been so close to winning a lot of those games. So they're right on the precipice. And Kirk Cousins in the last 2 games has been playing insane. 10 touchdowns and only 2 interceptions. He's looking very, very good. You have Dalvin Cook also on that team. He's questionable. We'll see if he's back for this week, and he's obviously a weapon. If not, Alexander Mattison is doing great. He's got over 150 yards and 1 touchdown in each of his starts. And then Justin Jefferson, because Kirk Cousins is coming on and doing great, he's looking good as well with 22 receptions, 326 yards, and 2 touchdowns over these last 3 weeks. This offense starting to click, and hopefully they get Dalvin Cook back and just add a weapon to that offense that's doing very well, and see if, maybe some of these games that they may not be the favorite to win, like a game against the Panthers, see if that they can get over that hump, because it's been one score for all of their losses. See if they can finally get over that. Then you look at the Panthers, who, speaking of losing by one score, lost to the Eagles 21-18. They had 3 turnovers, 69 yards in penalties, allowed 3 sacks, and had less than 300 yards in total, which is kind of a shocker. This is an offense that's looked very good so far under Sam Darnold, which is crazy to say. But Darnold did not do well. He in the last 2 weeks, he's got 5 interceptions. But 10 touchdowns this season. He's been looking very good. He didn't look good in this game, and this is their second straight loss. They dropped to the Cowboys the week before, 36-28, where Darnold also threw interceptions in that game. So this is a good team. I feel like they have a good defense. When we talked about the Eagles, their offense wasn't impressive. It's partially because the Panthers have a very good defense. Just a couple of tough draws, I think, for them these past couple of weeks. And you have DJ Moore, who's got 43 catches, 398 yards, and 3 touchdowns this year, really emerging as that main guy for Sam Darnold to throw the ball to. Against the Vikings, who, sure, all of their losses have been by one score, but most of the time, the offenses they're playing are doing very well. And, it's another toss-up game. 2-3 against the Panthers, who are 3-2. Both coming off losses, 2 straight for the Panthers. The popularity on it is Carolina. 58% of people are picking them. This is a game where I think probably they could bounce back and get back to how they've looked the first few weeks of the season. And it's against the Vikings team who is susceptible to, giving up offense and losing in the last seconds of the game, giving up, the game-winning score or whatever. So it'll be a fun one to watch. I think both offenses, honestly, will have a good day. Vikings, it's a little more questionable because the Panthers have a good defense. Moving on to, in my eyes, what could be the game of the week, the 4-1 Chargers versus the 4-1 Ravens. We'll start with the Ravens. Their Monday night game was very, very entertaining to watch. First half was shaky, and then they just came out in the second half and put on a show. Sadly enough for me, losing because of Lamar Jackson in fantasy football. But this offense is starting to actually look like an NFL offense. Lamar is starting to throw the ball well. They finally got Mark Andrews into the mix. About time, he's got to be one of their top receiving options. And then Marquise Brown, you always knew the talent was there. It just was a matter of time of Lamar getting him the football. And now this offense is looking really, really good. Lamar looked fantastic. The only problem with him is every once in a while you'll have a turnover, and there was a couple times in the game on Monday that he almost gave the game away because of turnovers. So it'll be interesting to watch. Their defense can make big-time plays in big-time situations. You had Calais Campbell get through the line and block a field goal that would have made it a 2-possession game and could have lost the game right there for the Ravens. So they're looking good. They are entertaining now, so it'll be good to watch. Then you have the Chargers, who are also 4-1, who had the game of the week last week. 47-42 against the Browns. The fact that this offense could put up 47 points against a Browns defense that is really, really good. Just a few weeks ago, had 9 sacks in the game and turnovers, 493 total yards for that Chargers offense in that game. One of the hottest teams right now in the NFL, and this offense is just caught on fire. going to have to get a fire extinguisher to put them out. Herbert himself had 398 yards and 5 touchdowns in that game. Over the last 3 weeks, 12 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. A drastic change from the first 2 weeks when all of the yards were there and no scoring was there. So a big turnaround for him. Austin Eckler is ignited as well. He's got 5 touchdowns in the last 2 games. And Mike Williams, who is tearing it up this season, looking better than Keenan Allen in my opinion, but it's an opinion. 31 receptions, 471 yards, and 6 touchdowns. 4 of those touchdowns have been in the last 3 weeks. So again, this is an offense that is insanely good. This is a game that could be a shootout because of how it was with the Browns. I think you can expect a shootout again from the Chargers, and that Ravens offense looked really good. 57% of people are going the Chargers. I don't know. It's gonna be a lot of fun to watch. Could honestly come down to who has the ball last. But both these offenses are ignited. So it'll be interesting to see, and it could be a game where both these defenses take over, and it's not high scoring. But the way these offenses are playing, I don't see that happening at all. Moving on, we have a game that is honestly not going to be competitive at all. The Rams are 4-1. The Giants are 1-4. The Rams won last week against Seattle, 26-17. Stafford looked incredible. He had 365 yards. That is his third 300-yard touchdown or 300-yard game this season. Add on 12 touchdowns and only 3 interceptions. It's about time a situation is working out for him. Quite possibly the best situation he could be in, because of guys like Cooper Kupp, who this season has 37 catches, 523 yards, and 5 touchdowns, and Robert Woods last week, who had 12 catches for 150 yards. Offense full of weapons. Van Jefferson also is a very good weapon. Darrell Henderson getting everything going on the ground. This is an offense as well that is looking fantastic, and an offense or a defense that's doing great as well. Besides, the stat that I'm going to say right now isn't going to correlate to me saying that they're a good defense. 388 yards per game and 23 points per game allowed. That's inflated. They've played teams that score a lot of points. The Buccaneers, the Seahawks, the Cardinals. So they've had games against really good offenses that no matter how hard you try, you probably aren't going to stop them. So that number's inflated, but they held the Seahawks to 17. So they're looking very good, and they're going against the Giants, who lost 44-20 versus the Cowboys. They're just falling apart. You got Daniel Jones, who left with a concussion, Saquon Barkley, who accidentally stepped on somebody's foot, rolled his ankle. He left the game, and Kenny Golladay, all of those guys left the game against the Cowboys, and leaving Mike Lennon, Devontae Booker, and John Ross to be the weapons. They just aren't looking great in their 3 losses, or 3 of their losses besides the Cowboys are the Broncos, who, let's be honest, again, they aren't looking good. The Washington football team, who's also not looking very good, and the Atlanta Falcons, who, they're the Atlanta Falcons, They're going to not do all that hot all the time. Have been looking all right the past 2 weeks against not very good teams, though. So for that injury report for the Giants, you got Daniel Jones. You don't know if he's going to play. Concussion could leave him out this coming week as well. Then you got Barkley, Golladay, Shepard, Slayton. All of the playmakers on this team are out. So if you have Mike Lennon a backup running back, practice squad wide receivers, it's not going to bode well for you against a Rams team. So 98% of people think the Rams are going to take this. There's probably no way I could disagree on that. Moving on to a game with the Texans and the Colts. Both teams are 1-4, but if I'm being honest, especially after watching the game on Monday, the Colts are probably the best 1-4 team I've seen ever. I mean, they played incredible. They just kind of crumbled at the end. They pulled a Falcons, but Carson Wentz finally actually looked like he was living up to the potential that everybody expects him to have, which was incredible to see, honestly. He actually went out there and played a very good game of football. Jonathan Taylor did fantastic. He had a 73-yard touchdown in that game. So, this Colts offense, I think it's finding its identity in the fact that Carson Wentz is actually going to be in. He's actually playing. He's not, playing a little bit, getting hurt, spraining both of his ankles. So, I mean, honestly, I was very impressed with the Colts, and I think they're looking very good as well. The Texans, they're just a 1-4 team that is, you don't know what to think about them. They lost by a field goal, 25-22 against the Patriots. And their other three losses have been 40-0 to the Bills, 24-9 against the Panthers, and 31-21 versus the Browns. Their only win against the Jaguars, 37-21. It's just not looking good. But they're a team that, at least for a little bit in some games, looks competitive. And then you have Davis Mills for that team. He's their backup quarterback. Tyrod Taylor, still don't know the status on him, what's going to be going on with him. But Davis Mills, excluding the blowout loss to the Bills, has 480 yards and 4 touchdowns in those other 2 games that he has started. Daddy Longneck's looking not too bad. He's going out there and playing very well. Brandon Cooks, he's the stud of that team, no doubt about it. But this past week, guys like Chris Moore and Chris Conley, Chris Moore just signed up off the practice squad earlier in the week for them. Both those guys had really good games. Do I believe in the Texans at all to take down a Colts team that actually looked really good against a very, very good Ravens team? I don't think so, but it is a divisional game. It is the Colts. So we'll just have to see. 88% of people are going with the Colts on this one. So take it how you would like, but the Texans, Davis Mills playing very well. So there's a possibility that the Texans could pull that one out. Then we move on to the Chiefs versus the Washington football team. Now tell me if you would have ever thought the Chiefs would be sitting at 2-3 with the same record as Washington at 2-3. The Chiefs are they're looking weird. I mean, they lost to the Bills 38-20. Mahomes had 2 interceptions and less than 300 yards, and he has 6 total interceptions this season, which is actually, I believe, tied for the most in the league. Or it may be that the Chiefs have given the ball away 11 times, and that is tied for worst in the league. But either way, they're giving the ball away quite a bit. But they do still boast the number 3 offense in the league. Flip that around, number 31 in defense. They couldn't stop anything. They couldn't stop a baby from just walking through a doorway. They are not playing good defense. But it's just kind of hard because if you look at their other offensive weapons besides Mahomes, who seems to be the one making the mistakes, You got Tyreek Hill, 37 receptions and 4 touchdowns. And in 2 straight weeks, he's had double-digit targets. So he's being heavily involved. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who is having a knee issue, so that needs to be monitored. He's got back-to-back games with 100 yards and a touchdown. So he's coming into his own after a slow start to the season. And then, of course, you have Travis Kelce in the last 2 weeks. He's had 10 catches, 80 yards, and a touchdown, which, honestly, for Travis Kelce seems a little slow, a little lacking on the production there. But, it's a team that's just hard to gauge because they've got all of this talent, but that defense is lacking. And with Patrick Mahomes giving the ball away that much, it's not going to help out having the worst defense. And then you got Washington, who lost 33-22 against the Saints, which was tough because they outdid the Saints in every single category except for the scoreboard. And Jameis Winston against them had 4 touchdowns. What's, again, surprising about this team is their lackluster defense. 27th in the league, just not looking very good at all. Their offense is doing all right. Taylor Heineke has just over 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions since being thrust into that starting role. And last week was his first week without a touchdown since, filling in for Ryan Fitzpatrick. So he's been honestly playing really well. It's just not correlating into wins for this team. Then you have Antonio Gibson, who has 0 games this year with 100 yards rushing. When he's looked at to be that bell cow for Washington, if you don't have 100 yards rushing and you're supposed to be that lead back, it's kind of tough. And he only has 1 game with 100 total yards, and that was because he had a 73-yard touchdown. It's been slow for him. And he's a guy that really needs to get going for this offense to be successful and to take some of that burden off of Taylor Heineke. But we'll have to see how it goes because he's coming off a 2-touchdown game last week. So maybe he's starting to finally hit his stride. But we'll just have to see about it. And then Terry McLaurin, who's been one of the best receivers in the league this season, he's got 25 receptions and 3 touchdowns. An interesting stat, he's got 2 games now where he has 7 missed targets. So he's been targeted, 13 times and only gotten 6 catches, things like that. A little bit of it has to do with Heineke. A little bit has to do with he's dropped a couple of passes. But this is an offense that is also kind of moving along, starting to do things. And against a Chiefs defense that is struggling very hard, I think this game might be close. Don't quote me on it, but if it's going to be close, Washington's going to have to score a lot of points. I think the Chiefs' offense is going to blow up this coming week because, one, Washington's defense isn't good, and they just have so many weapons. I think they're going to blow up. The only question is, will Washington keep up against an equally bad defense? 95% of people are going with the Chiefs. Probably a good call, but if Washington can keep up, who knows? Moving on to the Packers versus the Bears. The Pack sitting at 4-1 after the what-the-hell loss on Week 1. And then the Bears are sitting at 3-2. You got the Packers, who won last week 25-22 versus the Bengals in overtime. There was like 5 or 6 missed field goals in the final 2 minutes and overtime in that game. It was wild. And you had the Bengals kicker, who thought he had won the game, kicked it, goes just left, hits the flag, and for some reason he thought he got it in. You kind of felt secondhand embarrassment for him because he started celebrating. He was jumping up and down. only to find out it was no good, and then the Packers go down and kick their game-winning field goal. So crazy game, honestly. And the Packers, since week 1, have won 4 straight, looking really good. I mean, it's what you would expect from the Packers with Aaron Rodgers. He has 3 games straight with 2 touchdowns, but last week was his first 300-yard passing game. So hopefully he can continue that going in against the Bears. Then you got Aaron Jones, who had his first 100-yard rushing game. He has 5 total touchdowns this year, but 3 of those came from 1 game. So, he's a secret weapon they have, but he just has to get it going, which he kind of did this past week. Got 100 yards rushing. Then you have Devante Adams, who's not a secret weapon at all. He is the nuclear weapon that everybody knows you have. He's got 11 catches, or last week he had 11 catches for 206 yards and a touchdown. This is now 3 straight weeks of 10-plus targets. Is it a coincidence that it is also 3 straight weeks of Aaron Rodgers throwing 2 touchdowns? No. Aaron Rodgers is getting the ball to Devante, and that is exactly what the offense needs to be successful. And we're seeing it every single week with Rodgers and Adams. Moving on, the Bears surprisingly won 20-9 against the Raiders this past week. They're now 3-1 in their last 4 games after losing in week 1, I believe it was. You got Justin Fields, who in 3 starts only has 1 touchdown and 1 interception. He's honestly not looking impressive at all. But he's going out and winning the games. I believe he started the last two or 3, and, they're sitting at 3-1 in the last 4. So he's just got to get going. It's an offense that's struggling. They're missing David Montgomery. Allen Robinson isn't performing up to par. Darnell Mooney is kind of starting to shine through as the bright spot on that offense. So Justin Fields, he was drafted to be that guy, to take over, and he just hasn't done it yet. So what could this team look like when he does? Still to be seen. The Bears' defense is 9th overall, though, 13th against the pass, 12th against the run, and 7th against points. So their defense is really good, which could, possibly spell trouble for the Packers this week. But with that offense that's so questionable, it's kind of hard to go with the Bears. But they did stop the Raiders, who are a very good-looking offense. But the Packers have 92% of the votes. But I don't know. It could be interesting, especially if Justin Fields finds a rhythm and actually starts to get comfortable and plays a full football game and looks good. What could that look like against a very good Packers team? Moving on to the Bengals versus the Lions. The Bengals are 3-2. Kind of one of the surprising teams this year, looking very, very good, going up against an 0-5 Lions team, which obviously if you're 0-5, you're not looking very good. The Bengals, as we mentioned, lost in that game against the Packers 25-22 with all of those missed field goals. Both of the losses they have are by field goals. They lost to the Vikings by a field goal, a game-winning field goal. They lost to the Packers now by a game-winning field goal. So it honestly takes a very good effort to beat this team. Joe Burrow's playing really well, to be honest. He's got 11 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 3 200-yard games and 1 300-yard game. Starting to get into his rhythm, starting to figure out what this offense is. Then you have Joe Mixon. He has 3 touchdowns and 1 game of 100 yards. kind of looking shaky. He had a really good week 1, and since then it hasn't been a lot. But Jamar Chase, 5 touchdowns, and 4 of those touchdowns were 30-plus yards. So he's looking fantastic. The offense is looking good. The defense, honestly, looking pretty good too. To be able to hold the Packers to keep themselves in that game is a testament to just how kind of underrated this defense is. They're pretty good. Then you got the Lions, who lost 19-17 in a last-second field goal against the Vikings. They also have 3 losses by 1 possession this year. I think it's just a matter of time before they get their first win. You got Jared Goff, who's playing pretty well. He's got 7 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 1,300 yards. He has 200 yards in every single week except for week 1. So, nothing fancy, nothing flashy, but it's honestly numbers that should be able to get the job done. And then you have Deandre Swift, who's also starting to come up and play very well. 3 games with 100 total yards, 3 touchdowns, and has one game with 50 rushing yards. Other than that, it's less than that. But 3 of the games this year, he has 50 or more receiving yards. So he's starting to play pretty well, trying to find this offense really is just trying to find their identity in what they're doing. TJ Hawkinson, he's a guy in the first 2 weeks that had 16 receptions and has kind of just fallen off in the last 3 weeks with only 8 receptions in those last 3 games. This Lions team honestly isn't doing terrible. I know they're 0-5, but when 3 of those losses are by 1 possession, that means you're really close. You're really there, you're really close to being able to go out and win some football games. Did they do it against the Bengals this week? 89% of people think so. 89% of people don't think that the Lions are going to get it going this week. Honestly, I like the Bengals, and I think they're one of the front runners for that division. But, it's a tough division, the Ravens and the Browns. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when they start getting into a lot of the divisional play. But this week against the Lions, I think it's all right. I think they're going to do a good job rolling past the Lions. But if that offense for the Lions can get it figured out, we'll have to see what happens. Another game that is looking really interesting is the 5-0 Cardinals versus the 3-2 Browns. The Cardinals won a tight one, kind of low-scoring one, against the Niners 17-10 last week. But this is an offense that's doing really well. They're the 6th-ranked offense, 14th-ranked defense, and they have a 12-point differential per game between them and their opponents. Kyler playing really well, has 13 total touchdowns, 2 straight weeks without an interception. So just playing efficient, scoring, looking good. Kind of the surprise for this team has been James Conner. He has 5 touchdowns in the last 3 weeks. He's got touchdowns in back-to-back weeks. He's their touchdown running back. If they are anywhere close, that's who they're going to give the ball to for a touchdown. And one place you can see that is with Chase Edmonds, who has 23 receptions, who's primarily their receiving back, but has 0 touchdowns. So James Conner looking very good, and we'll have to see if teams start scheming that way to be like, okay, he's on the field, we know where the ball is going to go. One guy that's real tough to gauge is Deandre Hopkins. He has less than 10 targets per week, 0 games of 100 yards, but has 4 touchdowns in 5 weeks. The only problem is 2 of those came in week 1. So he's a guy that's going to have to kind of pick it up. But if he doesn't, there's Rondale Moore, Christian Kirk, AJ Green. All of them have been picking up the slack, and Kyler's looking really good. So the Cardinals are just an impressive-looking team. Then you have the Browns, who, again, we talked about it when we talked about the Chargers, who lost 47-42 last week. They are the first team in NFL history to lose when they have 500 yards, 40 points, and 0 turnovers. Like, just think if you go out there and you play a game, you have 500 yards and 40 points, and you don't turn the ball over, you should expect to win that game 10 out of 10 times. This is the anomaly, I guess. They looked really good. Mayfield had 300 yards and 2 touchdowns last week. Nick Chubb had 161 yards and a touchdown. Kareem Hunt had 89 total yards and 2 touchdowns. And then a breakout game from David Njoku, who had 7 catches, 149 yards, and a touchdown. And both losses they have to the Chiefs and the Chargers were by 1 possession. Which against the Chiefs, that's a game that they should have won, to be honest. They gave it up on their own. But this is going to be a real fun game to watch. It's one of the closer ones. 59% of people have picked the Cardinals. But we'll have to see, because both these defenses are honestly very good. Both these offenses, the Cardinals, we know for sure, are going to be an explosive offense. The Browns, we saw it from them last week, so there is a good possibility we could see that again. So that one will be a good one to watch. Then you got the Cowboys versus the Patriots. Cowboys sitting at 4-1. How about them boys? And then the Patriots are 2-3. Looking at the Cowboys, they won 44-20 against the Giants. Dak Prescott, they got to love having him back because he's got 1,300 yards and 13 touchdowns. They have to love that Zeke is finally getting going. He's got 450 yards and 5 touchdowns. Those 5 touchdowns is tied for first in the league. And Zeke has back-to-back 100-yard games. So they're really putting this offense together, finally coming full circle with the running game as well. Amari Cooper, though, he's kind of like, where has he gone? He had 13 receptions in week 1 and 12 in the 4 weeks since. So I don't know if maybe he's dealing with some sort of injury or what's going on, but guys like CeeDee Lamb are picking up the slack with 24 catches for 348 and 2 touchdowns on the year. And then Dalton Schultz, if he hasn't solidified him as their top tight end, I don't know what else he has to do. He has 3 straight weeks with 6 catches and 3 touchdowns within those last 3 weeks. So where did Amari Cooper go? Who cares? Dalton Schultz and CeeDee Lamb are really picking up the slack there, and it's just going to be a bonus for this offense if Cooper starts getting involved again. Then we look at the Patriots, who won last week against the Texans, 25-22. I mean, the fact that they went into the fourth quarter down 22 to 15 against the Texans, who aren't a good team. They're not a good team, especially after going in and playing Tampa Bay as well as they did. You would have expected more out of them against the Texans, but they didn't. Mac Jones set a little bit of history after this last game. He's the first rookie quarterback in the Super Bowl era to have a 70+% completion percentage on 30 attempts or more in the first 5 starts of a rookie's career. It's a little tough because he's got 5 touchdowns and 5 interceptions and only 200 yards in 4 of the 5 games this season. This Patriots team, it's just kind of tough to gauge them as well. You know, they have a pretty good defense, but their offense is 26th overall. When Mac Jones was named the starter, there were high hopes that this could be a better offense than it was last year with Cam Newton. It's only slightly better. It's not really any better at all. They're, sitting at 26th, ranked offensively. Like, it's tough. And when you have a game that you barely won against the Texans, going in against a team like the Cowboys, who, not to mention, their defense is going crazy. Trayvon Diggs, don't throw the ball at that guy. Like, Mac, don't throw the ball at that guy. Throw it elsewhere. But the Cowboys looking really good. Everybody else apparently thinks so. 87% of people are choosing Dallas in this game. I think there could be some fireworks, and the Cowboys could have another really good victory. And going to have to listen to Cowboys fans say how good they are, because they probably could be 5-1 after this week. Moving on to another divisional game. Tough game to look at. The Raiders and the Broncos are both sitting at 3-2. Neither one of them have looked very good in the last couple of weeks. The Raiders lost 20-9 versus the Bears. That's their second straight loss, and they have less than 300 total yards in both of those games. Carr had 402 passing yards for 2 touchdowns, but 2 interceptions in the last 2 games. So that offensive magic's pretty much worn off. And now you got to add on top of these 2 straight losses, John Gruden having to step down as the head coach because of all of the things that came out about him. Very sad to see any of this going on. But you just stack that on top of 2 straight losses for the Raiders. It's a game that probably could be pretty tough for them, especially with an interim head coach now. The Broncos, they lost 27-19 against the Steelers. They almost made a comeback, but I blame the announcers. All game they were talking about how Teddy Bridgewater hadn't thrown an interception, yada yada. He goes down, throws that great pass to Cortland Sutton. We go and down by 8. They continually are talking about, he hasn't thrown an interception. They spoke it into existence because on a game-tying drive to send this game to overtime, he drives them all the way down the field and then throws an interception in the back of the end zone. So it's the announcer's fault the Broncos lost last week. That's what I'm going with. They've given up they have given up 50 points in the last 2 games, and that's 2 straight losses for them. It's not looking good, especially when your first 3 wins, you go 3-0 against bad teams, and then you give up 50 points the next 2 weeks en route to losing 2 more games. It's tough. 61% of people are picking the Raiders. Honestly, don't know what way to turn here, because you got both teams coming off 2 straight losses, but one team's dealing with turmoil. That could be a deciding factor. So the Broncos may get back on track this week, maybe advance to 4-2. Not a bad-looking record. Moving on to Sunday night, a battle of 2 and 3 teams, the Seahawks and the Steelers. The Seahawks lost 26-17 against the Rams. Russell Wilson broke his finger, had to get finger surgery, out 6 to 8 weeks. That's a tough blow. You have Geno Smith now, who's going to be stepping in for them. He was 10 of 17 for 131 yards, a touchdown and an interception coming into the game last week. But at one point, he had a chance to drive these guys down the field, put a touchdown on the board, and put them within striking distance of a very good Rams team. So honestly, not that bad. And that interception came very late, end of the game. So is Geno Smith going to be all right? I don't know. Wasn't good enough to start for the Jets, so that should say something about him. DK Metcalf, though, in the last 3 weeks has 15 catches, 270 yards, and 4 touchdowns. 5 touchdowns overall ties him for first in the league at wide receiver and tight end and, in receiving. Tyler Lockett, though. In his first 2 weeks, he had 12 catches, 278 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Since then, only 13 receptions for 112 yards and 0 touchdowns. He's a guy that's kind of disappeared. He had a big catch last week, but that was it. He's not necessarily just disappearing. He's still out there, still making plays, but after a solid first 2 weeks, he's kind of just gone away. But he's a guy that's going to have to show up for Geno Smith him and Metcalf are going to have to really show up. Chris Carson, he's always up in the air, questionable almost every single week. So we'll have to see what his status is for next week. But this game is split right down the middle, 50-50. Half people think Seahawks, half the people think the Steelers. It's going to be a tough game. The Seahawks, how are they going to do with the backup quarterback? The Steelers, are they going to be able to keep the magic of the offense they had last week against Denver? It's going to be tough. If you look at Ben, he had 253 yards and 2 touchdowns. Najee Harris had 23 carries, 122 yards and a touchdown. Chase Claypool, 5 catches, 130 yards and a touchdown. Deontay Johnson, 2 catches, 72 yards and a touchdown. Nearly 400 total yards on offense. And their defense had 2 sacks, an interception, and only gave up 106 yards on the ground. So they looked like a Steelers team last week. They looked really good. But is it something that they can maintain? I don't know. We're just going to have to see. If Ben can honestly play the way he did last week, the Steelers could be, again, back in the contention for that division. Ending it off on Monday night, another big-time primetime game for the Buffalo Bills, who are 4-1, against the 3-2 Tennessee Titans. The Bills won last week 38-20 against the Chiefs, and they've been on a roll. 40-0 versus the Texans, where they only gave up 100 yards and forced 5 turnovers. They won 43-21 against Washington, where they only gave up 290 yards and forced 3 turnovers, and then beat Miami 35-0, giving up only 200 yards and forcing 3 turnovers. This offense is crazy as well. They have really hit their stride since that first game to the Steelers. They had 314 total yards in week 2, 481 in week 3, 450 in week 4, and 436 in week 5. That is 1,600 total yards and 156 total points in that span after week 1. Looking outstanding. In that stretch, Josh Allen has 13 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Stephon Diggs has 19 catches, 305 yards and a touchdown. Emmanuel Sanders is looking insane with 15 catches, 270 yards and 4 touchdowns. And then Dawson Knox in the last 3 games has 12 catches, 203 yards and 4 touchdowns. 5 total touchdowns for the tight end position in the last 4 weeks. This is an offense that's humming. This is a defense that's on fire. Held the Chiefs to 20, a high-powered Chiefs offense. Held them to 20. The Bills are on a roll. They're going up against the Titans, who are coming off a win against the Jags. But they're coming up against Derrick Henry, who essentially won the game for Tennessee this past week with 3 touchdowns. He's pretty much the reason they've won 3 games. They barely held on against Seattle and Indianapolis. They lost to the Jets. But again, the only reason this team has been competitive at all is Derrick Henry. 4 straight games of 100-plus rushing yards, has 7 total touchdowns, which is first for running backs. Averages no less than 4 yards per carry since week 1, and he has 2 games so far with 3 touchdowns. Again, I think the Bills are going to clean up. Sure, they may have some troubles with Henry because Henry's an absolute monster. But, I said Bills by 2 touchdowns last week, and I wasn't wrong. I think it could be Bills by maybe even more than 2 touchdowns against the Titans. And 90% of people pick the Bills on this game. A real quick top 5 power rankings to close out the show here. You got the Buffalo Bills on top at number 1. The number 2 team, the Arizona Cardinals. The number 3 team, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The number 4 team, the LA Rams. And the number 5 team, the LA Chargers. LA's got a lot of good football going on there. So it's going to be fun to watch, guys. Thanks for joining. Don't forget to tune in tomorrow for the Lucky Shots podcast for the fantasy show. And then don't forget to also tune in on Friday where we'll have our betting show with Dylan Corbett. But for this show, it's all over. Thanks for joining. We'll see you tomorrow.